Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. Our topic for today is pretty much about the OKR as an approach or as a method for formal goal setting in your company. And normally we would we've been doing these webinars for a few quarters now, and we really appreciate all of the feedback we've been getting. But in case you're coming into this webinar with some other questions, rather than specifically if OKRs are the right fit for your organization, please let us know in the Q&A. Maybe we will be able to answer some of the general OKR related questions at the end of this session. So it will be also interesting to see if you have any specific thoughts, opinions, or challenges that you are dealing with currently in your organization. Also, since normally, obviously, we have these webinars for team managers, CEOs of the companies, but we often see that we also have a lot of OKR coaches or agile coaches in these sessions. So let us know, what is your background, where you're coming from, where you're based in the world. Let us know in the chat of this Zoom session. It will be interesting to see who we have today here in the audience, so that we can maybe adjust and tailor this session a little bit to what you would expect it to be. And also feel free to use today the questions section, the Q&A section on Zoom, to ask everything that you would like to get answers to. This recording will be sent out to you within the 24 hours after this session. And once again, this is a live session, so make sure to take this opportunity to ask the questions in the live Q&A that you have here. Just when you're asking a question, make sure that you are using the Q&A, not the chat, because otherwise, with a lot of messages in the chat, we might overlook some of them. Today, we have our team live today with us, so we will be answering some of your questions live, even as the webinar is going on. One thing that I wanted to mention also, it's very, very important to understand what your expectations are. So what your real questions are for this webinar. So right now, while we're still at the beginning, take a moment to think about what you really want to get answers to. That might help you to ask the right questions and to find this session more and more productive. So thank you for everyone who is introducing themselves in the chat. Nice to meet you, Armin. Nice to meet you, Miran. I am Anna from Weekdone. I'm a customer success manager, and I'm going to introduce our speaker for today, who is Richard. Hi, Richard. Richard is the head of customer success here at Weekdone, and he has been helping companies to succeed with different goal setting approaches for many, many years. He's an expert on OKRs, but also on many other things related to helping businesses succeed and manage change. So I do urge you to take this opportunity to ask the questions from him, because it's a really nice chance to chat and to have an expert address some of the challenges that you might have been facing in your business. So do let us know if you have any immediate questions for us to deal with. But for now, let's start the webinar. Richard, over to you.
Super. Thank you, Anna, for the introduction. So what do we plan to cover today? Basically, will OKRs work for my business? Are there businesses where OKRs do not work? It's a very common question we often get asked. Will OKRs work for my business? We'll try to answer that as we go through. One of the problems often with people asking that question is the first thing they miss is, what is really the purpose of OKRs? How do they fit in with the other tools we have in the business? What is the purpose of OKRs? Are we ready for OKRs? Is probably a better question than will OKRs work? And you'll see why later on. And the other one that often gets asked is, how long does it take us to implement OKRs, or when will we see value in OKRs? Good questions, very good questions, somewhat hard to answer, but you know, we're going to try and cover how you would understand what you need to do and how long is it going to take to get there. As Anna said, any questions, please put them in the Q&A section. We will answer the questions live, but we're also going to try and collate the questions and cover them live at the end. So please, please, please ask questions. Anything that comes to your head, please put it in the Q&A. We'll try and answer and we'll try and cover back later. So, I mean, the question, where do OKRs not work? Well, if you think about OKRs being a focus on improvements for companies, for teams, to drive the business forward, to take strategy into execution, to fix or achieve KPI and targets. That's what OKRs are about. So where would they not work? Well, if we're not looking or ready to improve, or we're 100% executional. What I mean by that is we have some businesses. I was chatting to one the other day that had grown, but they were still a relatively young company, and they just needed to be 100% execution. That they needed to get more people in doing what their core business was, and that was it. That was the only way they could expand. They weren't ready to look at improving yet. They were really in this 100% executional to grow method and mentality. And in a sense, OKRs aren't a great fit for that. They could very clearly determine we need more people on seats doing the core function of our business, and that's it. Great, not bad, but it's not there. The other one, if we're not ready to improve, and that could be we're a startup where, for example, we haven't found product market fit. We're very, very early. Things are changing a lot. We're trying to find where we are, what we're going to do as a business, or how we do it. There can be reasons in either of those areas that it doesn't fit. I mean, if we're not looking to improve, don't use OKRs. If you're 100% example, don't use OKRs. I think for the rest of it, OKRs are a great fit for the majority of businesses. Those two cases there, we're not ready to improve, is kind of rare in most businesses. 100% executional is also kind of rare in most businesses. Not impossible, but rare. So what do OKRs do for a business? And there's actually sort of four main areas that OKRs focus on. The first one is focus and commit to priorities. And what does it mean? Well, it really means about choosing the few important items for the quarter that we want to improve. We want to drive the business forward in. The few we will come to, quarter is a timescale. So focus and commit to priorities is talking about the number and the time period. Number two, align and connect for teamwork. And there's a great clue in there. Teamwork, and OKRs are teamwork. Teams and teamwork drive companies. The teams make the changes in the businesses. Leadership sets the direction. And it's so, so important to understand how do we connect these things together. So the leadership sets the direction, and the teams and the teamwork drive the company forward. Track for accountability, update and share progress. Very simple. Often everybody talks about this and then starts to say, but we don't want to share this and we don't want to share that and we shouldn't share that. Now, often it's because they've written bad OKRs and they aren't really OKRs. But one of the points of OKRs is making it transparent. You have to have that need to want to share how you're doing. Stretch for amazing results, aim high, change thinking. We're going to come to that. That's one I struggle with sometimes on different ways to think about stretch, but it's one of the four items, the superpowers. If any of you have read Measure What Matters from John Doerr, it's a great way they explain this. These are the four things you're trying to drive with OKRs. Now, let's try and put that into a little bit more context and into action here. So here I've got a company level, company objectives. What do we want to achieve? And we have team OKRs that are feeding that. Now, let's walk through these superpowers. Well, focus, the first superpower. We need to set directions for the quarter, for the company, 1 to 3 objectives. Again, focus. We're choosing what are we telling people to focus on, and at the teams, we're setting 1 to 3 OKRs. OKR methodology says maximum 5, but often 5 is way too many. one of the things you often see is companies want to fix everything, and the word focus and trying to fix everything you need to fix in a business counteract each other. OKRs drive you to focus. Company objectives, alignment. If I'm trying to align teams and the company together, a lot of people sit there and draw lines in all directions, and this project links to this and this and this, and yeah, everything is kind of interlinked in a business. But if we think about OKRs, they structure your thinking, and what they're driving you to do at the company level is, as a leader, to set the direction for the team, set the way we're going to grow or change or execute on strategy, or what we need to improve or fix in the business. The teams write OKRs to drive that improvement that are aligned with the company objective. And basically what they write for the OKRs is super important, but those OKRs will change the business, will improve the business, and they will align with the company. So basically, those OKRs are feeding the direction the company, the leadership has set. In a sense, you're getting this top-down direction. Team improves, drive the business up. So OKRs need the input from leadership and the teams to work well. Track. What do we mean by track and share and everything else? Well, for example, this is an example OKR. We have our key results. They should be measurable outcomes. We're not going to discuss a lot about that today, but it's the core of OKRs. In previous webinars and other webinars we've done, we've discussed in a lot more detail about how do you write OKRs as well. But if we're going to track them, we need some way of sharing them. And over the weeks, and I say weeks, and a lot of people will say, well, a week's too often for us. Well, the problem is 13 weeks in a quarter. If you don't think about things weekly, if you think about it once a month, it's too late. If you're off track with making progress, if your projects or initiatives or whatever driving your OKRs aren't working, if you don't watch it week on week, you won't see whether you're staying on track. And you can end up somewhere at the end of the quarter being behind or off track on one of your KRs or all KRs. Now, just hitting the numbers isn't the only thing with OKRs, but we need to track them. We need to share it. We need to make sure it's visible to everybody. It's super important in the way the method works. Stretch, as I said, it's often a very difficult one, even somewhat contentious if you read a lot of different articles. Should, you shouldn't stretch, does it really work, etc. I don't want to get into that today, but if you think about it, why are we setting a stretch? Well, it might be that we're trying to reduce the response time, and I'd set this one before at 10 minutes, but if we think about what the target is, we might say, well, from 90 to 30 minutes should be possible with the resources and a little bit of effort. Yeah, we think we could optimize that. Well, 20 minutes might be a bit more difficult, need some reworking of processes. Yeah, possible. 10 minutes, which is actually what we set as a target here, might be possible, but hard. It might need some innovation. In this case, we've also talked about getting maybe more staff or different manpower to drive it. There's a big difference in the way we think. And often one of the things that stretch does, it makes people think differently. Now, I've often seen teams will naturally stretch themselves. I think often you don't need to push teams to stretch themselves. They will do it naturally, as long as you're not using OKRs for team or individual performance management, which is not their purpose. Never was, never should be. And if you do, you will always end up at the target will be the worst possible result. So nobody would probably even put 30 minutes reduction. They might say from 90 to 80 because they want to hit the number. Won't drive thinking. The OKRs should be a safe place. They should be allowed to stretch things. And if they don't hit it, if I set it to 10 minutes and I hit 20, still all is good. The other thing is, where do OKRs fit? And a lot of companies come into OKRs and they kind of have some form of strategy or directional tools to drive the business. They have some form of KPIs, metrics, and targets to a degree. And a lot of teams have executional tools or processes that they're using. It could be a sales team with CRM or project management tools or project tools for the development side, ERP, MRP for manufacturing, and maybe HR with performance management. And that's the way they've run for a long, long time. And these executional tools are great for the day-to-day. What is missing in this is the link between the strategy and the business as usual, executional tools. And that's where the OKRs fit in. The point of the OKRs is to take you from strategy or KPIs that you need to improve and say, what do we need to change or improve to make it happen? So they might affect the processes we use in the business as usual, but they're not just measuring the business as usual. The OKRs are all about that change or improvement we need to make to hit strategy or to reach KPIs that are a stretch. Team-specific executional tools support the day-to-day work. They don't cover the same things that OKRs are covering. So, are we ready for OKRs? Well, that's always a tough question. What we're going to cover here is really about the 4 areas we need to think through. So it's kind of like knowledge, motivation, culture, and the tool. How are we going to display, track it, etc. Let's just walk through these step by step. So knowledge. Why are we using OKRs? One of the big problems we often see is, even within companies, that basically the internal leadership is not even aligned on the point of using OKRs. One thinks it's for performance management. Another one thinks it's for tracking projects. Another one, and we end up with a lot of different thoughts on what is the purpose of OKRs. We need to make sure we are aligned and we know what the purpose of OKRs are. We need to know what the weekly, monthly, quarterly processes should be. There's a lot of processes around OKRs that need to be executed on, need to be done to make the OKRs succeed. We're also going to need to know how to drive change. Not just that we know it's going to change, but how we're going to make this changes stick. OKRs for most businesses are going to change the way people work and the way people think about things. Coming on to motivation. We had to be motivated. We need top leadership support. We need leaders supporting and driving this change from the start. We need to be committed to stick with it for 3 to 4 quarters. We see a lot of companies that come in and they kind of want to put minimal effort in. They want OKRs to fix all their problems and they want to do it in 13 weeks. Sorry, it's not a silver bullet. You've got to put time and effort into OKRs. You have to do it well. You will get a lot of benefits out of it. Okay, somebody said there's some sound problems. I don't know. Anna, is the sound all okay on your end?
Yeah, everything is okay.
Okay, super. Just checking. Super. Okay. Training and coaching efforts. Are we committed to making sure that we are going to train the staff? We're going to do coaching. We're going to help them through. It's not a tool that you can just pass down to people and expect it to be just picked up. It's not the type of process or method that you read once and you understand it all. We need to think about managing the change. We know that OKRs are about driving outcomes, about changing the way we think about what success looks like. It's very much about managing that change. It is a lot more than people understand. I think the problem is that a lot of times people look at it and say, well, it's a really simple method, objective, key result, easy. But the effort needed to do that well is not without, a great deal of training and change management to make it stick and work and do it properly. Culture, one of the things I said earlier about sharing, OKRs are very much open, transparent. We're going to share them. We have to have a culture that allows that teams and leadership trust each other to share. The failing and learning is accepted. I mentioned earlier, the time. We might say, okay, we wanted to reduce from 90 minutes to 10 minutes the first time response rate. Now, if we got it to 30 minutes and we set to 10, we're some way off where we wanted to be, but we made a huge improvement. Is that okay? Yes, it was good. What did we learn? There's not just the number that is important in OKRs. Did we learn? Did we improve? Are we better off than we were before? So it's different thinking. It's measurement driven. Now, a lot of companies get caught up in measurement and say, well, we don't have the measures and we won't do OKRs because we don't have the measures. But actually, sometimes doing OKRs drives you to think about what can we measure. So you need to become measurement driven. Your key results are measurements, they're outcome measurements. So you need to be able to measure them properly. You also need to trust the teams to develop OKRs. As I said earlier, leadership saying, here's what the direction we want to go. And the teams looking at their team and saying, this is the things we could drive and change and improve to move us in that direction. And that trust between leadership and the teams and the teamwork is super important. If you're not willing to change, OKRs won't work for you. And there's a lot of businesses that read, measure what matters and other motivational stuff. They jump into OKRs, but they weren't really ready. They weren't ready to drive that change within the organization. And you pretty much have to be to make it work. The easiest one actually is the tool. You could use share sheets, presentations, dedicated software such as Weekdone. It's the relatively easy part to doing OKRs. So obviously there's differences in software and et cetera, but the big ones are really getting yourself in a position to make it transparent and open, but that can be done in multiple different ways. So let's say everything's perfect. We're in the middle of all the 4 circles with perfect readiness. Great, we're ready to go. Now, it's unlikely many of you will be in that position, but I think there's 2 things you need and 2 of these areas that you will learn over time. You need some way to present the OKRs. You need the motivation. If you're not motivated, it's not going to work. The culture and the knowledge, you can learn the knowledge and you can change the culture as you go. As long as you understand why you're using OKRs and you set the required processes up, those can drive the changes needed. Obviously, there has to be the willingness, to learn and the willingness that the culture will change in the business. Actually, the only way you're going to do OKRs well is writing OKRs with practice. We only learn by doing OKRs. And I think it was Sergey Brin or Page had written in the front of Measure What Matters, it took them 9 months to do OKRs well. And he put the analogy that it's like exercising a muscle, and it absolutely is. You get better and better over time at writing OKRs. It takes practice. You have to learn as you go. Don't expect to get there in 3 weeks or 4 weeks. Which kind of leads us on to how long does it take to implement OKRs? Well, to get up and running, it's very quick often. The one thing you have to think about is even before you start, get leadership commitment. Not just commitment, but are we committed to the same vision of what OKRs are going to do for us? Have we got a rollout plan? Have we shared the purpose of OKRs? Have we made sure everybody understands what we're doing, why we're doing it, and why we haven't done this before, or what this is going to do? Not that OKRs are just going to be additional work for people, but they actually are going to benefit them. In the first quarter, you're going to set some OKRs, company sets the O's, team OKRs that align, and we need to get into executing and driving to make those OKRs move forward. Those OKRs won't be perfect. You will still get benefits even in the first quarter. But what you need to be doing is, 1, learning You'll learn what works and doesn't work for you as a company in OKRs. You're going to learn how to write better key results and outcome-based key results. We'll cover a tiny bit later on, et cetera, et cetera. What you're going to do in the second quarter is discuss those challenges, polish the workflows, make adjustments. So you're going to improve again. Third quarter, again, you're going to be discussing and learning. One of the big things is each quarter getting teams to share what's worked, what hasn't worked from a process, and what they wrote and what they've learned from it and what they haven't learned, and did they write good OKRs, etc. This improvement process over 3-4 quarters is very much about the whole company sharing what they've learned and really trying to make sure that people treat it as a long-term improvement project. Almost all businesses that do that, when they get to the fourth quarter, they are off and running, and they are quick at writing good OKRs that really help them develop the right things to do in the business to improve. So we've seen it really, really work well, but you have to have this mentality of trying to drive those changes over the quarters. Not always easy to change the organization. And how do the OKRs fit in? There's a lot of different pieces of how this all fits together. You know, a lot of companies, as we said before, we have vision, mission, strategy. Those areas often will drive the company objectives. The company objectives will often be could be for the year, definitely should be for the quarter, and maybe for the year. But what do we want to achieve this quarter? What is the improvement or direction we need to move in? The KPIs, and it doesn't mean KPIs are the objectives. KPIs are possibly driving a company objective. For the example, it might be that our customer satisfaction scores are lower than we would like. That doesn't mean we put the customer satisfaction KPIs in as the objective. What we then say is, what are we going to do to improve them? Or what do we need to focus on to improve the customer satisfaction? Now, once we've got the company objectives, we have the team OKRs. Those are going to drive the changes, the improve, the growth, change, innovation within the business. And again, the KPIs, and it could be, hey, I'm in a sales team, our sales numbers are not on track or not growing at the rate we want. We need an OKR, which isn't just the sales numbers. It's the how are we going to improve the sales numbers going forward, or what are we going to improve with the way we work to drive up the numbers. And under that, we have initiatives, projects, plans, tasks, the elements that drive the OKRs forward. We have, you know, the vision, mission, strategic type, long-term elements. We have the KPIs, we have OKRs, and we have the executional part. Those are very different areas, and being able to clearly identify these as pieces and not jumble everything together. Unfortunately, a lot of people, when they approach OKRs, they start jumbling KPIs and strategic stuff. Everything gets jumbled together. Everything has its place. Everything has a purpose. So I think you've got to be able to segment the things. You've got to be able to put them in the right blocks for the right purpose. And it is super important to getting started with OKRs. I think the big thing when starting out, don't make it too complex from the start. The biggest problem we see with people starting out is often they add way too many, meaning often from the company level, you know, yeah, I know you said 1, 2, or 3, but we have 20 things we want to improve. Or we've used other methods and we have 5 pillars. So we'll add those in there to start with, but they don't really do anything for anybody. And then we'll add, for each pillar, we'll add a quarterly one, and now we're already off with way too many. So start simple at the company level, align up to the company level from the teams, write OKRs that the teams can own and deliver. I think another area is where everybody starts to cross-link everything together, and it makes it super complicated. Later on, when you're 2, 3, 4 quarters in, you can look at, do we need to have cross-aligned OKRs? Or is having a high-level company objective that's clear actually causing the teams to align naturally? Alignment is about everybody understanding the direction we're going and working in unison. It doesn't mean everything's interlinked between the teams. That isn't really alignment. So one of the other things that's really, really important is your OKRs need to engage people. So what drives engagement? Well, part of it is the accountability, and it stems from the leadership being accountable for setting the company level objectives, the direction we need to go and sharing it. Team managers and team members writing their OKRs and being accountable for them and accountable for the execution. In fact, everybody that's involved in those improvements, should be accountable. So collaboration is needed to set good OKRs. One of the big things that OKRs often do and build in companies is people discussing, it can be leadership and down to the next level down, leaders or managers, on what needs to happen, what needs to improve in a business or within a team, that the team as a whole discussing what can they do to drive things forward that aligns with the company objective, what are good key result measurements, etc. This should then set the direction and success measures. The point of OKRs is not to tell people what to do, it's to tell people the outcomes we want to drive at a team level. Don't use OKRs at the personal level, it's not OKRs. OKRs are a team sport. It even says it in the second superpower. The other thing that really should drive engagement is agility to learn. We will plan, do, check, and then act again in a sort of more cyclic version. So when we do something, when we do those initiatives, plans, actions, to-dos that drive the OKRs forward, did it make the outcomes change? So what I do and is an output, and the outcome that we're trying to drive, the improvement, the customer behavioral change, is what we should see happen. And this should actually drive thoughts, discussions, and it's interesting for the team to see what's working and not working. I think the other thing is discussions on lessons learned and sharing insight. It's important. It drives people to think about how they're doing it in their team and how others are doing it and what everybody has learned. OKRs are a very collaborative sport. The other thing you have to remember, what we do doesn't always drive success. And it's one of the points of OKRs. If I do a project or if I write some new onboarding emails, I can complete that project, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's completed. It doesn't mean it made it better for the business. And that's what OKRs are kind of telling you. Did what we do deliver an outcome to the business? And talking about that, outputs, plans, initiatives, projects, we need them. But we need to understand that the output, what we do, is not the OKR. These are the things that will drive an OKR. It's a deliverable. They're done or not done. Initiatives, plans, they're projects, series of tasks, whatever you think about. We hope it brings success. As I said before, completing a project or completing a new series of emails for onboarding, I hope it's going to make an improvement, but it's not guaranteed. And completing it doesn't tell me whether it did or didn't work. It shows the effort, not the value. It might change if it doesn't bring results. Whereas the outcomes, it's the measurable result we want to achieve after doing something. It's often referred to as an observable change in customer behavior. It doesn't just mean external customers, it could mean internal customers. It's watching how something changes. That's the end result we want versus what we do. It shows success. If we drive an outcome forward, we can say we were successful, done. It stays the same until we achieve it. Now, this is one of the fundamentals. Outputs being the plans, projects, initiatives, the outcomes being the OKRs is one of the fundamentals. And we've done other webinars discussing this in much more detail. It's super important. It's actually the thing that makes them engaging as well. It's really, these outcomes make us think about the impact. What are we trying to impact in the business? And impactful things, improvements, growth, change, innovation. Those are all words I've used, but if you think about it, that's what OKRs are for. So There was two other areas I want to talk about. We talked about a lot of other things that we've answered here, but one of the other questions that often comes up, what levels in the organization should we start with? Well, hard to say, but you've got a number of tried and tested ways. Often the best way is to start from the leadership, CEO, CXX, and work your way down, or from a department head down to the teams that report to that department head, and work down through the organization step by step. Alternatively, you can obviously go down a branch. We could go from the CEO to the product team down to the teams within the product group. Great, that's one way to do it as well. We could, if we're small, we could onboard everybody in one go. I can't tell you exactly the way to go, but think about it. Think about how you're going to roll it out and who to, so you don't overload yourself. The other one is who's championing the OKR process. So you need somebody to drive it. In smaller companies, that often needs to be the CEO or a CXX at least, or COO, somebody that really is going to drive it forward. Even if it's not the CEO CXX, you then need a champion that has influence in the company, somebody that can really help drive the changes through. They need to have full backing of the top leadership if they aren't the top leader. Do not make the intern in summer the OKR champion. It will not work. They don't have the influence. They don't understand the organization. They won't be able to help people write good OKRs or change the OKRs. It's super important you think about who's going to be championing this, especially as it's going to take 9 months. It needs to be somebody that's going to be driving it for that length of time. Not full time, but they need to be there and doing it. So, will OKRs work for you? Summary. Well, in most businesses, yes, there are only a few exceptions, very rare cases where OKRs won't work. Will all companies succeed with OKRs? Well, big no. I think for a lot of you that read things, there's different stats quoted on percentages of people that succeed, but a lot of people won't. But a lot of people come into it expecting it to be simple, fast, minimal effort, or something I can just pass and hand over and expect it just to happen. It won't work. We need the leadership to be aligned on the purpose of OKRs. They need to be committed. We need to be okay with changing the ways we work to apply the OKR method properly. One thing I've often seen, and one reason it doesn't work is, we might have done MBOs before, or we have this pillar system to drive our quasi goal setting. Very sort of theoretical management driven systems, whereas OKRs, I would say, is much more practical and pragmatic. And people don't want to let those things go. So they start hybriding things together, and it's quite common in businesses that run longer. They end up with a lot of processes that are weird combination hybrids. I'll often say that you're just messing up the OKR method by doing that. If you're going to use OKRs, use OKRs. We have to accept it's going to take 9 months, and it's going to take effort and change from everybody in the companies to succeed. We need to make OKRs a safe space where trying and failing is okay. We need to detach it from performance management, from salary, etc., to make it work. If you read about that, every good article you read, all the stuff from people that have really done it say, don't do it. A lot of them have done it and actually come up and found problems with it. So just don't do it. It's a great tool if it's done well. If it's not, you just won't get people engaged. Everybody will just see it as extra work, etc. It is going to take your time and effort. Don't be fooled by OKRs looking so simple. Objective key result, I know what it is, it's simple. Everybody should get it. Yeah, not so simple. So that's really the end of where we were. Just to say, if you've got questions, or later on you've got questions, you can ask at hello@weekdone.com or richard@weekdone.com. Happy to answer questions direct. We've actually got the LinkedIn elements here and here as well. So you can actually join our company, Weekdone LinkedIn. My link LinkedIn is here as well. Happy to have people on there as well, and happy to answer questions through emails or on LinkedIn as well. So, Anna, did we have lots of good questions?
We did. We have some really good ones for you, Richard. And it's actually not just like one-liners. So I'm going to have to explain a little bit of
Okay.
background story on some of those. Let's start with the simpler, shorter ones, at least in terms of the answer to them, I think, or at least I would assume that that would be a shorter one. So you mentioned that OKRs won't work for businesses that are 100% executional. What kind of businesses are those? Could you give some examples?
One I saw was an insurance company. So it was a relatively new underwriting insurance, and it was for a particular type of asset that they were underwriting. And where they were at the moment was literally they were doing well, but they now just needed, their expansion was they needed more underwriters. And they said, it was like, how are we going to expand? Well, for the next 12 months, we just need to add underwriters. That's it. We don't need to think much about what we do, how we do, and all those. We just need more people in the seats to look and assess customers' insurance needs and do the underwriting part of that business. Other ones I've seen is sometimes design companies, which are only working on for third-party companies. They're all executional project driven. Some of them don't look at how they would improve internal processes, or the internal processes aren't something they really think about or need to improve at the moment. They just need to execute on the projects. So they're 100% project execution as opposed to thinking about improving things. So that's a couple of examples. I hope that helps. It's not common. Most businesses have an executional part, but most businesses need to improve other things in the business than just the execution, or they need to improve the way they execute.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting that you brought up insurance because I didn't even think about that. I did reply this question on our Q&A while you were still on the webinar. And my mind went directly, first of all, to design, yes, companies, but also to companies that have external clients and it's sort of like servicing. So I think insurance kind of also falls into that same description.
Yeah.
And I also thought about construction companies. So it's, again, you're doing something for the other internal third party. So it's not that you're managing your internal business, but rather, providing a service on maintenance or construction or design for someone else.
And I think even in the insurance case, they looked at it and they said, and probably in 18 to 24 months, we will probably come back and look at OKRs, because we're then at the stage where we need to think, how do we do things better to get more customers, to make, better decisions? And, so often it might be not now for OKRs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, on that topic, I think if it's too early, I guess, in a company's life, then it's going to be just goals will be changing almost every week. And it's really not sustainable. And probably you can just go for, I don't know, SMART goals. It's faster, less trouble. And maybe once you're ready, once you have established what you're doing and what you want to improve, then OKRs is the right fit. So really need to think about if you can, if you need it, like if you need to manage a team with the OKR approach, right? It's not just about writing a goal. It's actually about engaging the team with the OKRs.
Absolutely.
Another question is like a further development of this one. So let's go for it. OKRs are not for business as usual, but we don't have any other way to set goals. So what do we do with our executional goals?
Okay, so I doubt your executional goals are goals, because the word goal means direction, improvement direction. And business as usual, by definition, means we're just cranking the handle with what we do. So goals and business as usual are two different words, and often they're muddled up by people. What you do have for your business as usual is your KPIs. That's often the way you're measuring your business as usual. If if our sales are on target, we're measuring our sales effectiveness maybe by the revenue we generate and the conversion percentages. That's how you measure business as usual. You have a KPI and a target. Either it's a growing KPI or it's a horizontal. I talked about the earlier one of customer satisfaction. Maybe we set a target of 80% for customer satisfaction. We measure it, every week, every month, every quarter. And as long as we're over 80%, for example, we're good. Things are working. The way we're supporting our customers and the feedback we're getting from them is good. That is keeping us on track and honest with our business as usual. That's the point of KPIs. That's what they do for you. They really help you set and maintain your business as usual. Now, taking that customer satisfaction one, if we drop to 70, i.e. we drop below the target, we need to do something to improve it. And the classic approach was shout at everybody and tell them they need to do better. They need to improve the customer satisfaction. We need it above 80%. Well, it's not a great way to drive a business. I often say hope isn't a strategy, and it isn't. I hope we improve. Great, that's fantastic. The point is, that's where OKRs fit in. We need to do something. We need to improve. And it might not just be in one team. It might be multiple teams need to improve a product and the way we support and the speeds and, to drive the customer satisfaction back up. So business as usual is usually related to KPIs. That's the point of them. It might be that some KPIs, growth KPIs, might be saying, well, we want to go from 1 million this quarter to 2 million next quarter. That's growing. It also might mean we need to change, grow, or innovate in the business to get there. Again, we might need an OKR to set that. But your business as usual generally is measured by your KPIs, not goals. And KPIs are not goals. Often jumbled up, but read the word goal as a definition and it explains it. So I hope that answered that question.
So many different things people call goals.
Yeah.
Can be really confusing. So now we've reached the long form questions. So I'll take some explaining, but mainly this, let's call it a cluster of questions because we did have more than one.
Yeah.
It's on the topic of OKRs fitting together with the balanced scorecard. So the first question reads, is it possible to implement OKRs on strategic initiatives or high-profile projects to integrate with a balanced scorecard?
I've never seen it work. If you use balanced scorecards, that's your quasi goal setting method. If you use MBOs, that's your method. If you use OKRs, that's your method. Jumbling methods together generally is just not going to work. Balanced scorecard is very structured and rigorous. And that's why a lot of people move from balanced scorecards to OKRs, which is a lot more dynamic and flexible and short term. Balanced scorecards tend to be very complex and very heavy in people and time to set them up. You don't jumble them all together. As I said at the end, I've seen some horror stories where people have melded different goal setting methods together, where you end up with an MBO, balanced scorecard, OKR hybrid that nobody understands. And pick which one works for you as a business and use it. That's it.
Oh, if only you were that easy.
I think you've got to be careful that you don't jumble things together. Often what they start to do, they start to work against each other, or it just becomes confusing for people.
Yeah, and instead of setting goals, you're suddenly just trying to fit a methodology instead of moving the business forward, which is ridiculous. But often, I do agree that it rarely works together, it never works together, but also mainly because you just spend so much time using both of the methods that you never actually get to doing things. And sometimes it feels like it's like a magnificent waste of time. You've spent your time on the balanced scorecard. Now you need to also set OKRs.
Yeah.
Feels really, really overwhelming. But balanced scorecard in general is like as a long-term sustainable goal setting and engagement solution is never gonna work either way.
Yeah.
So you might want to, while you're already, if you're addicted to the balanced scorecard, have people do it if they're used to it, but start slowly switching some teams
Yeah.
and getting them to, on board to learn how to do it properly. And then
it's a huge change, because you're going to tell them, don't plan out for the year. You're going to say, just for a quarter, think about the next quarter, think about what success looks like just in that quarter. And it's going to be a huge difference. The idea is with OKRs, the time to set, the time to plan should be much shorter. And some companies struggle with that. I once spoke to a company and they were very concerned because they said they thought what they were brilliant at, their superpower was planning for years in advance. And kind of the problem was they said, yeah, but OKRs, that defeats our superpower, being able to plan things out for years in advance. It's like, well, if you see that as a benefit, then yes, it does. But the point of OKRs is, why plan out for something you probably can't determine? You don't know where you're going to be in beyond 3 months exactly. Plan for the quarter, execute well, drive and see and learn from it, and then plan the next quarter and keep moving like that. So you don't spend this once a year heavy management planning sessions.
Yeah. I think it was in Start Less Finish More. Dan Montgomery had this like fantastic example about planning for long term. He was saying that in the New York City, people were trying to figure out how to, it was like in the late 1900s, or in the late actually 1800s, before the invention of the car. They were trying to figure out the 10-year plan of how to deal with, horse waste, so that the city doesn't drown in it. And then suddenly the car was invented next year. And so like no one had to deal with it anymore. So the 10-year planning session was a complete waste of time.
Rip it up, start again. Yeah.
Yeah. So really, we don't know what awaits. Yeah. So we really should focus at the tasks at hand.
Yeah.
We have a subset of this question regarding the balanced scorecard, but it's a really, really long one. So I'd rather just zoom in on this one specific part, which is, on which level of the company do we implement OKRs? And keep in mind, this is a company with a lot of levels. So,
and I think that's one of the issues that how do you align things in a company? At what level can you set the direction? Is it from the top level down? Or some companies at a top level, there might be, are you divisions? Are you departments? Is it one business with different areas? It's very hard to answer, because I've seen it where some people are more like public limited companies, and they might have 10 business units addressing very different businesses. Well, there's no point trying to align everything up to a high level beyond a very broad statement, which doesn't give much value. Often the OKRs would sit at the operational levels, at the areas that are running the business units. So, from that business unit and down. In general, your OKRs sit at a team level. And what I mean by the team, it's the group of people that really drive change. Now, in some companies, that could be, let's say, a product tech team that might have product managers and technical people in, but they might have front and back end and everything else, sub teams in there. But the OKRs can sit at that team level, the bigger group that are all working towards an improvement, and they line up with the company or the department and then the company. I think often OKRs work very well through 3 levels. It doesn't have to be all the structural levels of the companies. You can skip some. What makes sense? It's not something I could say this is the way to do it, because it's different in different companies. You have to know the details of the company specifically to understand how to align it and make it work through. I think one of the things is, again, making too many sub-levels. If they aren't adding value, don't do it with OKRs. You can link from a team straight to the company level, even if you have 5 levels. You could do it definitely if you have 3 levels. Maybe it makes sense to have an intermediate level if it's divisions, It's not simple to say.
Often when there are like more than 3 levels, even with 3 levels, so anything more than 2 levels, people just end up duplicating objectives on different levels, which is ridiculous, because why do you
Yeah,
need the same objective on every level? What value
yeah,
does it add?
yeah. Yeah, I've seen it sometimes work where they have annuals at the company level because it's a parent company, very broad. Then they have divisions or departments under that, and they have the quarterly that's taken from the company big direction, but the quarterly objective which focus that divisional groups focused efforts there, and then OKRs at the team levels under that. So
Yeah, quarterly to annual makes sense totally.
yeah, so there's many different ways to do it. I think it would be impossible to just say this is the way to do it or that's the way to do it. It depends on what's going to work for you and make sense and add value. You're absolutely right. If you're just copying down the same objective down and down and down, no value.
Yeah. I'm going to share an article on alignment best practices in a bit. For now, let's move on to the next question. We only have 2 left, so this one and the next one. And both of them are more or less management and culture related. So the first one about culture. Do you believe the cultural prerequisites that you mentioned must already be there 100% before implementing OKRs, or can OKRs help drive that cultural change?
Good question. I do believe the OKRs can help to drive those cultural changes. I don't think you have to have them all there. What you do have to have is the motivation to change. You have to understand that it is going to change the culture, and you're okay and accepting of changing that culture. It could be that we haven't been naturally a transparent company. And you have to be okay that we're going to make a transition away from being a more siloed company, i.e. teams working in silos was okay then, but that's something we want to change. And obviously that's something that just telling people to share stuff isn't going to work. You have to drive the changes. You have to get people to think differently about why to share it. They have to feel comfortable to share. You know, it's about the management and the leadership and the teams and the team leadership feeling comfortable to change. So absolutely, OKRs can be used to drive. I think they can drive the knowledge that you need for OKRs can be driven as you're going along. The culture can be changed as you use OKRs. There's some things that you have to accept are going to change and be okay with it though before. You're on mute, Anna.
Sorry, that happens occasionally. I was typing, didn't want to hear my typing, so I was saying that I answered something very similar, so that means that we're very much aligned on that topic.
Yeah.
Okay, so the last question is more about the rollout strategy, so like with whom to start in a company, but I'm going to read it all because it gives you context what the question is really about. So what do you think about organic adoption of OKRs, basically accepting that some teams will see the benefit earlier and others might not? We are currently supporting our client to adopt OKRs across different departments and teams all at the same time. The reality is it will not happen all at the same time. How can we make sure the early adopters spread their knowledge versus the skeptics spread insecurity and frustration?
Yeah. Brilliant question. Absolutely brilliant question. And whoever wrote it, I can tell you've tried to implement OKRs because it's absolutely true. This is the pragmatic reality of rolling out OKRs in companies, that some teams will get it. And usually it's to do with the team, and the team leaders just gel with a concept and they progress quickly. Some other people and teams will naturally try to block any changes or just don't get it or don't understand it or can't conceive it conceptually. I think the thing you have to do, and it's one of the reasons why often I think people talk about this 9 months. You know, in the first quarter, you're going to get some of the teams using it well, and they're starting to improve. And the 9 months or 1 year, 3-4 quarters is for that purpose. It's going to take you time to pull some of the teams along. It's going to take you more time and effort on some teams to drive them to think differently, to get them to set good OKRs, to see the benefits of OKRs. I have seen in examples where some people that are the most anti-OKR. I had one case where a guy that was painful, to say the least, dealing with, trying to get them to do OKRs well. And eventually it clicked. It took a while, but they got there. And the guy suddenly realized that it wasn't extra work. It actually made his team work better. Now, he left later on. He went to another company and he actually dropped me an email message and says, hey, this company doesn't use OKRs, terrible. Can we jump on a call? Can you show them, what I've tried to explain to them and how Weekdone works and how OKRs work for us. So a lot of times I think it just takes time and effort. It takes that motivation to make sure you keep driving all the teams forward, knowing that some are going to pick it up really quick and some aren't. The one I often struggle with is, my background is actually sort of sales and customer facing groups that I've run for large organizations. And it often horrifies me when sales teams set OKRs and they just put the targets, the KPIs in as the KRs. And it's like, oh, we're done. Okay, but how are you going to reach them? How are you going to improve and everything else? And then you realize it's not, then nobody thinks about it. And I think the coaching and the guiding has to be about getting good OKRs written, and then that will naturally draw people into discussions. The other thing that I think works particularly well is mid and end of quarters, where teams present to all the other teams in the business live, that the team leader explains where they are with their OKRs, what they've done, what's worked, what hasn't done. Because that means they're committed. They have to do that. And also the teams that are doing well will share what's worked for them and what progress they've made. And I think sometimes just trying to push people to do something, they need to see others using it well. And there's some pull as well as some push needed. And that sharing, that 10 minutes of sharing my sales team's OKRs with all the other teams to see how and what we've done and what's worked and what we've learned, and discussing maybe what's working and not working for us on the OKR methods, particularly first, second, third quarter. Super important for everybody to learn and to get everybody thinking in unison. So it's a brilliant question. It's not simple. It takes that change management, methods and focus and stubbornness to get there in the end to make it happen. I think it's one of the reasons why you see failures after one quarter, after 13 weeks, that some teams get it, some don't. So, it drops to, half the teams using it, or a third of the teams using it, or 20% of the teams using it that saw the value in the first quarter. But if you don't keep the momentum going and get the others to learn it, it will just drop off on usage over time.
Yeah. Yeah, sticking with it for a few quarters is really key.
Yeah, and some teams find it harder.
Pushing back, it's kind of really hard to convince them to.
Yeah, and I think sometimes seeing other teams use it successfully, and of course some people will say, yeah, but they're different, and yeah, okay. But eventually, as more and more teams get on board and get value out of it, the outliers are very visible.
Yeah, I think there are two very opposite opinions. Some teams and some team managers are really excited and they're really crazy about OKRs and they want to put everything they do in there. Or they're really, really skeptical and go like, what does it even, why? Why another thing to do?
Yeah.
So have to find a balance of the attitudes.
And I think making sure there's a champion or people that can help and drive these changes over that 3-4 quarters is super important. That question written by somebody there shows that they're thinking about it, and that's what's most important, that you're watching it, you're understanding it, you're trying to work out how to get those other teams to see the value. You need to do that. You need to do it for a period of time, long enough to make it actually occur, and for the OKRs to kind of embed themselves into those teams.
Yeah,
Not easy always.
this was a question from Erica. So if you have any follow-up questions on this one, please reach out either through LinkedIn or through email, because yours seems like a very interesting use case, and I would love to hear from you and continue this conversation. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, it's one of the real questions, and I would say real issues people will face as rolling out OKRs. You know, everybody thinks, oh, you know, first quarter we'll have everybody using it. No, you know, it's very rare to have that, almost impossible. You know, super, but good. Is there anything else,
good.
Anna?
No, we're done with the questions.
Woo-hoo. Good. So thanks everybody from my side. Thank you, Anna, for hosting, and I hope everybody enjoyed it, and thank you all for attending. Thanks a lot.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Have a nice day. Bye.